Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good afternoon. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to have the chance to introduce our next speaker, who is actually on his third visit to the ICD, so he's becoming a regular. We're very grateful that His Excellency has come back for the keynote address this afternoon. I'd like to say a few words of background about His Excellency, who is by no means a newcomer to Germany, and has actually spent a good amount of time getting to know the country both in Bonn as well as Berlin. His Excellency Ambassador Aureliu Ciocoi, I'm sorry about that, Ciocoi, initially began his professional life as a journalist and worked for a number of years as a journalist, roughly 1988 until 1992 in Moldavia, for a number of different newspapers in Moldavia. He then began his diplomatic career in 1996 as the second secretary for the Department for European Organizations at the Foreign Ministry in Moldavia. He then continued to become the head of the referat, or the department, for cooperation with the European Parliament, European integration, at the Foreign Ministry in Moldavia. His first position, actually, outside of Moldavia as a diplomat was Germany, although at that time not in Berlin, at the capital in Bonn. He was actually, from 2001 until 2004, the first secretary of the Embassy of the Republic of Moldavia, as well as the head of the Außenstelle, or the consulate representation, in Bonn. He then, from 2004 until 2005, was the head of the Europe Department at the Department for International Law and Contracts at the Foreign Ministry in Moldavia. Then became the head from 2005 until 2007 for the Department for Cooperation in terms of Europe and human rights. Also the Department for International Cooperation at the Ministry for International Affairs and European Integration for the Republic of Moldavia. From 2007 until 2009, he was the Botschaftsrat, which I guess you would translate the Deputy Chief of Mission? The consular, or deputy chief of mission, for the Embassy of Moldavia in Germany. And then from 2009, 2010, Geschäftsträger, would that actually be deputy chief of mission, I guess? Geschäftsträger? Say it again? Chargé d'affaires. Okay, we have too many international words for the diplomats. The Chargé d'affaires of the Embassy of the Republic of Moldavia. Finally, since 2009, he has been serving as the ambassador of Moldavia to Germany. So really a man of a lot of experience, and I think what's interesting is the mixture also of journalism as well as diplomacy. So I think you're bringing two different angles to the table. The lecture topic that the ambassador has chosen today is the Eastern orientation, policies of the European Union and the European orientation of Eastern Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for His Excellency, Ambassador Aureliu Ciocoi. Thank you.
Testing? 1, 2, 3.
It's green. No. Okay, so this is good. Now it's turned on. Okay, we're green. Excellent. Good. Success. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for all of you that you've shown this interest in hearing my presentation. Unfortunately, I'm going not to read from the paper, but to say from my heart, to you. The topic which was chosen for my today presentation is quite wide, actually. It's the Eastern orientation of policies of the European Union towards Eastern Europe, as well as Eastern European countries' orientation towards the European Union, which is quite difficult and the top momentum for a lot of Eastern European countries, especially for my country, as it is now. And well, actually, after the disappearance of the Soviet Union empire, as I may say, or as I may use this word as regarding the former Soviet Union, suddenly the international community has to deal with 15 newly appeared countries in that very specific geographical region of the world. One of those being Republic of Moldova, by the way, and not Moldavia, which is using to be used in Russian language. Well, after that momentum, European Union has focused actually on whole that geographical region. You know it very well. A lot of tools were established by the Brussels as regarding Eastern European countries. First of all, it was European entities, European neighborhood policy, which purposed to help new independent countries to develop themselves democratically in civil society and the democratization of structures and so on and so forth, and to help us to become more and more democratic, more and more previsible, which is not easy sometimes, as concerning some of those countries. Afterwards, you know that inside the European Union there is such of concurrence between European Union member states. A lot of them, they are looking towards Eastern European region. Another prefer to look further to Northern Africa as Eastern European region. And basically of these two different point of views, we have nowadays also some disputes inside European Union, being more specific, for example, between Germany, Poland, Baltic countries, Romania, Bulgaria, from one side, which are being more oriented towards Eastern European area, and from the other hand, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, which is prefer more to orientate themselves towards Northern Africa, especially now after so-called Northern African Spring. And of course, on this basis, a lot of discussions inside European Union in Brussels, how to deal with the amount of money being reserved in the framework of European neighborhood policy towards this huge amount of assistance countries around the European Union. And a solution was proposed in 2010 by Sweden and Poland, namely to establish a new tool towards a couple of Eastern European countries, a so-called Eastern Partnership, which includes 6 countries of the region, namely Ukraine, Belarus, Republic of Moldova, which I am representing here, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. 6 countries were selected to be partner of inside of this new established framework, Eastern Partnership, in being incorporated in the more broader framework of European neighborhood policy. Well, of course, if you're asking me what is the reason for such a political decision done by European Commission and member states of the European Union, it's quite simple. European Union needs to have a previsible area in its own neighborhood. European Union wants to have new countries stable, new countries, its neighbor countries predictable, its neighborhood more and more democratized. Well, as concerning European Eastern Partnership, I do suppose that the European Union has to deal with quasi unsuccessful story as regarding all these 6 countries. This initiative, of course, was established to be a successful story, but unfortunately, if we are looking towards Belarus, if we are looking now what happens in Ukraine under Yanukovych, if we are looking what happens in Azerbaijan, Armenia, the things becoming not so happy for European officials in Brussels. And under this consideration, my country, Republic of Moldova, becomes more and more art as such an example for that region. Namely, and it's not a secret that under these circumstances, being compared with other Eastern Partnership countries, Republic of Moldova seems to be a success story in this orchestra. Why the Eastern European countries has to show their own interest to move towards or to be interested in closer cooperation with European Union? There are a lot of differences, there are a lot of different arguments for each capital city of these 6 countries, and if we are going outside Eastern Partnership framework, of course, there are a lot of reasons also from Moscow officials to keep the partnership strategical cooperation with European Union countries. Well, of course, there are a lot of different interpretation if we read articles of political analysts and so on and so forth. But my personal opinion, and I'm not speaking now as in my official position, but as if I may say this in a private manner, there are, of course, different interests from Eastern European countries towards European Union. If we're looking in what happens in Belarus, of course, under Lukashenko, it's quite difficult to establish a fruitful dialogue with European Union, and it could be difficult for next couple of years till Lukashenko will preserve his power in Belarus. From the other hand, European Union tries to approach Belarus to its own sphere of influence, which seems not to be very successful at the time being. From the other hand, the participation of Belarus in this so-called custom union with Russian Federation and Kazakhstan gives also a smaller room of activity for Lukashenko himself in his dialogue with European officials. If we're looking at Ukraine under Yanukovych, the things are going worse and worse. Being a champion in approaching to European Union for a couple of years under Yushchenko and Tymoshenko at that time as Prime Minister, now we have such called frozen relations between Kiev and Brussels at the time being. You know very well that the association agreement between European Union and Ukraine was put on the ice, and Brussels is still expecting some positive development in Ukraine as concerning democratization of the society and democratical functioning of its own institutions, as an argument to be considered in continuing the dialogue in signing and ratification of the association agreement with Ukraine. If you're looking in Armenia, well, they're still thinking about what they have to do in dealing with European Union. Should they go forward with their dialogue with European Union, or should they remain a permanent partner of Russian Federation in Caucasus region? Azerbaijan has its own interests, and it's no secret they feel themselves very comfortable being having a huge amount of energy resources in its territory, and feeling themselves very proud on it. And frankly speaking, some of Azerbaijani colleagues, some Azerbaijani diplomats, they are talking very frankly that they are not interested at all to go closer to the European Union, at least at the time being. Nobody knows what happens in the near future for mid and long-term perspectives. And remains Republic of Moldova, which after the so-called Twitter revolution from April 2009, and immediately after that changing the power representation of our government from the Communist Party, which was on the power for 8 years. At that time comes a new democratic coalition to the government, and the final radical decision was to switch our foreign policy quite radically only towards European Union approach. And since that period, we succeed to implement a lot of reforms in our country in trying to catch as much as possible European standards in our day-to-day life in the Republic of Moldova. And that is why my country is being considered at the time being as I mentioned, a success story in the framework of Eastern Partnership. You know, some of my good friends here in Germany, in Berlin, a deputy director of the Eastern Committee, German Eastern Committee for Economical Cooperation with Eastern countries, told me that Moldova is a very interesting story, saying that, you know, you are so lucky being in a so bad class, because in comparison with other colleagues from the Eastern Partnership framework, Moldova, of course, has to be recognized as a success story. And as a proof that Brussels is really dealing seriously with the Republic of Moldova, I can give you an example of the speech given by Mr. Füle, Stefan Füle, the Enlargement Commission of the European Union, which for 2 weeks here in Berlin officially says in his speech that the Republic of Moldova deserves to get the clear European perspectives from European Union, and the Republic of Moldova deserves to be considered one of the next candidate country to join the European Union, which is quite unusual to hear such words from high-ranking EU officials, taking in consideration the huge amount of problems which has to deal nowadays European Union itself, its euro crisis and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, European Union remains very attractive for Eastern European countries. Even Belarus and even Azerbaijanis will be happy to make deeper their own cooperation with European Union. And of course, we have not to forget also the specific position of Russian Federation and all these geostrategical or strategical games in the region. You know very well, from the other hand, that Russian Federation tries to preserve its own influence in the so-called near abroad. Who speaks Russian knows very well this terminus used by newly entering in its third mandate President of Russian Federation, Ближнее зарубежье. It's expressed very clear the interest of Russian Federation to preserve and to continue to control everything what happens in the near abroad. Moldova being a part of it, Ukraine also, of course, Belarus, Azerbaijan, and in fact all these 6 countries from Eastern Partnership framework from the European Union. And I'm not going here to make an interpretation, it's good or not good, but each country has to promote and to fight for its own interests, and Russian Federation, of course, has a right to do it on its own. But the final decision should be given by the people who are living in those countries and preferably not to be influenced from some external powers. Well, I'm going to argue to the priority of Eastern orientation of the European Union foreign policy, and quite clear because my own interest as a representative of my country is to fight for this orientation, but at the same time I have to recognize the legitimacy of Northern African orientation of the EU countries, and of course globally seeking, strategically seeking for European Union, it's very important to ensure the stability and prosperity all around its neighborhood, being it Northern African countries or Eastern European countries. But in each specific case, I do believe that European high-ranking officials should deal in the case-by-case tactics in their own dialogue with each country separately. For example, for a couple of years, Republic of Moldova was taken in the same boat with Ukraine as in our dialogue with Europeans. It's concerning the European approach of our both countries towards European Union. And we feel at that time, I mean we Moldovans at that time, that we are something like of hostages of the Ukrainian home policy. And we depended at that time quite clear from what happens in Ukraine and inside Ukraine, and of course in foreign policy activity of Ukraine towards European Union. Nowadays, we have to remark that the Republic of Moldova finally is being treated separately from Ukraine in our dialogue with European Union, and we are clearly happy that it happens, and we are not anymore being treated as a tandem to one or another country. And this is exactly this procedure which I have mentioned to deal with a case-by-case tactic in dialogue with Eastern European countries, and I do believe it should be also used in dialogue of European Union with Northern African countries. Well, it's quite clear that Republic of Moldova will remain in the middle and long-term perspectives on its pro-European foreign policy orientation. It's quite clear that we will try to preserve a good relations, so far strategic relations with Russian Federation. I cannot understand those politicians which are disconsidering Russian Federation as a fair partner at all in its or their foreign relations affairs. And the case of Georgia, it's a very good example what happens on 8 August 2008. And it was quite clear that Russian Federation can use or can solve very quickly one or another so-called frozen conflict in the former Soviet Union area. And what happens at that time in Georgia shows very well that the decision could be taken suddenly and quite radical one. Unfortunately, my country has also to deal with a frozen conflict, unfortunately not yet resolved frozen conflict in its own territory. You know perhaps what means Transnistrian conflict, but if somebody will show some interest, I can later explain what happens in this concrete field. So, I don't like at all long speeches. I don't like at all to take your attention with something, to explain you something that you very well know at your own. That's why I'm ready to answer on your question, and I prefer to have a viable dialogue with you, and that's why I'm ready to answer your question, and I'm looking forward to have a very fruitful dialogue together. Thank you very much. Should I stay here or? Okay.
Does anyone have a question or remarks?
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your speech. Your Excellency, thank you very much for your lecture, for your speech. My name is Elena. I'm from Russia.
Oh.
And yeah, and I do speak Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to ask you a couple of questions. The first question will be, how could you explain the failure of the European neighboring policy towards countries of the Eastern and Central Europe and the success of Moldova? What are the reasons for this? And
What are the reasons of
yeah.
success of Moldova?
What are the reasons of success of Moldova?
Okay.
And why the eastern or neighboring policy of the European Union towards countries of the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe is considered to be unsuccessful? Why it is like this from your perspective as a diplomat? And my second question would be more personal. How, from your perspective, is the attitude of ordinary people of Moldova towards our common historical past? I mean, the common past of Russia and Moldova and other countries of the former Soviet Union. Thank you very much.
I have to thank you for very, very good questions. Well, I'm going to hear another questions if they are. Yes, please.
I would like to thank you also for the lecture. And my name is Arturs, and I'm from Latvia.
Okay.
So my first question is there actually European orientation in Eastern Europe? And what I mean by that, I was very curious to learn from European Reconstruction and Development Bank statistics that in all post-Soviet and also all post-socialist countries, even though which are already in EU, less than half of populations are pro-market or pro-democratic, even in these basic things. So is there actually this European orientation legitimacy and in population, among populations of these countries, and especially those which are not in European Union yet? So can it be really compatible, Western democracy and our Eastern European formal democracy, so to say? Like
You're talking now about
Latvia.
your own country?
Yes, also about my own country.
So self-critic?
Unfortunately. And the second question regarding Transnistria, one of requirements to join EU is to solve all border issues. So when you will join EU, and probably you will, why not?
I hope so.
Yeah, then where the border of EU will be, on Dnistru River shores or like Ukraine?
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Other questions?
If I may. Thank you for your speech. My name is Andrea. I'm from Romania. I would like to ask you... Shimie. Mulțumesc. I would like to ask you if, considering the position of certain Moldovan citizens which can obtain Romanian citizenship, do you think this makes them closer to Europe, to feeling European, than the other Moldovan citizens which cannot obtain Romanian citizenship? And do you think this will divide in the future the Moldovan population? Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me start with the last question. Yeah, please.
My name is Sean, and I'm from the United States, and I'm just wondering what the Moldovan government, how it receives and how it responds to rhetoric from the Russian Federation about Eurasia, or the Eurasian continent.
Well, in this case, let's start with the last question. Eurasia. Well, Republic of Moldova, not only Republic of Moldova, Ukraine as well. We are being treated now by Russian Federation as a possible part of this initiative launched by Mr. Putin in October last year. Actually, this idea is not a new one. If I remember well, this Eurasia idea was firstly launched by Mr. Nazarbayev, the president of Kazakhstan, at the beginning of 2000s. And at that time, he means really to establish such a union in the former Soviet Union area. excluding nowadays Baltic countries, Baltic states. But as concerning Eurasia, I have to say that this is unfortunately at the time being still an idea. In Moscow, Mr. Putin has established something like a secretariat of this Eurasia arrangement, but I haven't seen any specific movements regarding something concrete steps towards establishing institutionalization, so-called, of this initiative. Geostrategically, of course, it's quite clear that the interests of Mr. Putin and Moscow is to rebuild the huge former empire, which gives the opportunity, attention to Moscow, to speak with other influent partners in the world at the same level. And that is a huge problem of this initiative, because the establishment of such an initiative without quite clear specification what it means, and how it will be work, it gives a lot of risks to fail in a one-way ban. I mean one-way ban, it's exactly will be the dialogue between Moscow and international community, and not a capital city of member states of this Eurasian Union. That's why even now Mr. Nazarbayev personally is quite skeptic as concerning this political initiative of Mr. Putin. And if you follow closely what happens with regard with Eurasia initiative, I can remind you the speech given by Mr. Nazarbayev for a couple of months with respect of some high-level Turkey officials' visit to Astana. And it surprisingly was for me also and for politicians to hear that Mr. Nazarbayev at that period in his speech talks not about Eurasia initiative, but he talks about pan-Turkish community. And they recognize themselves as a part of Turkish civilization. It means that the players now on the ground are much more than Moscow and Russian Federation, Turkey being more and more influent in that specific region, which gives, of course, for Moscow additional troubles to convince partner in the so-called custom union to proceed further and to try to establish a functionable Eurasian union. We feel ourselves also very, very hot. The wish of the Russian Federation to have Moldova also on board. And as an example, I can give you our dialogue with Gazprom as concerning the new gas agreement between our government and Gazprom. And the reaction from Moscow side, especially not from Gazprom, but from political leaders of the Russian Federation, was quite clear. Either Moldova returns from its European way, and then you will get cheaper gas, or prepare yourself to pay a huge amount of money for the same gas. Nowadays, for example, Republic of Moldova is paying twice for the same gas as Germany. And you are looking at the political map, you will see where is situated Republic of Moldova and where is Germany. And, well, we don't want, Republic of Moldova don't want special treatment from Russian Federation, but we want a fair price policy as concerning energy resources of Russian Federation to its so-called near abroad or even any international actor. As concerning Romanian citizenship, you know, one of the former German ambassadors to my country, I'm not going here to give his name. 2 minutes, okay, quite quickly. He says once that Republic of Moldova could be a precedent, the whole population being citizens of European Union, but the country itself not. And if you ask me, I do consider that my own parents, being born in when nowadays Republic of Moldova was a part of Romania, before the Second World War, after the annexation of my country to Soviet Union at that time, nobody asked my parents which citizenship they will prefer to keep, Romanian or Soviet. They was automatically switched from Romanian citizenship to Soviet one. That's why I do consider that all our population deserve to get Romanian citizenship. If we compare what is being done by Russian Federation in my own country, I can give you statistical data. Romania delivers 80,000 passports to Moldovans since our independence, 22 years. Russian Federation at the same time delivers 150,000, 130,000 of which are being distributed in the so-called Transnistrian region of Republic of Moldova. It's quite clear, it's a policy. And of course, our citizens are trying to use Romanian citizenship, not being interpreted themselves as more Europeans, but trying to avoid visa ban or visa troubles to get in the European Union countries. It's quite clear now around 1 million Moldovans are working abroad, especially in Italy, Spain, Portugal. A lot of them goes to these countries completely illegal, without any official documents. And of course, it's their legitimate right to get Romanian citizenship. I'm not talking only about Romanian citizenship. A lot of Moldovans are getting Bulgarian citizenship. A lot of Moldovans are getting Israeli citizenship, and so far and so on. But Romanian and Russian citizenship, it's usually used in our political dialogues with Moscow from one side or Bucharest from another side, sometimes with other European capital cities, to try to find a solution how to deal with. But I am confident that what the former German ambassador to Moldova says could be really happened. That the population will be European, but the country itself not yet. Another question, Transnistria, where will be the border? Well, we are trying to do our best in order to preserve the integrity of our country. If you ask me where will be the border, I can readdress this question to our Moscow colleagues, because they have to decide if Transnistrian conflict will be settled peacefully or not. Just an example, we are negotiating now the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union, which seems to be in parallel with association agreement with the European Union, which seems to be signed at the next summer. If Republic of Moldova succeeds to have a free trade area with the European Union, it means that in our part of the Republic, we will have one kind of prices, and Transnistria, when she will not join the same free trade area with the European Union together with the rest of the country, they will have completely different price. Not cheaper, but much more expensive. And then I will have to ask our Transnistrian colleagues, well, what now? We have invited our Transnistrian colleagues to join our negotiator team and to be in the game, a part of the game with the European Union. They refused. It's their own choice. Unfortunately, they have not to deliver choices by themselves. Usually, they are delivering what Moscow is going to say to them. And it's their tragedy, actually. Because they are depending 100% financially, politically from Russian Federation. That's why the key of the final solution to that conflict is in Moscow and not in other European countries, and even not in my own country, in my own capital city. That's why, of course, we will, in an ideal situation, we will try to join the European Union together with Transnistrian region of Republic of Moldova to be a consolidated, reunified country. But if politically somebody will ask us on the momentum of joining the European Union, do we want to join now without Transnistria? Or you will remain outside the European Union? I can assure you that the decision in my capital city will be taken immediately. If I answer your question. If European orientation in Eastern countries have to be there or not. Of course, if you are looking on the Umfrage, wie kann man auf English? Surveys on all these countries, you will be surprised that majority of the population, they wish to be part of European Union, to be part of European family. It's true also for Belarus. You know, the cultural diplomacy, the people diplomacy, when the people are traveling and when the people are seeing and feeling what does it mean to be a European, and then they come back to their own country and they try to do something in this respect in their own country. It's something which works very, very hard. And the single solution to avoid such preferences toward European Union will be to close the borders as it was done in the former Soviet Union, in the so-called Cold War. That's why I am confident that European Union wish is there in all societies of Eastern European countries, even in Russian Federation. If you are going to ask Russians where they prefer to be in Europe or in Eurasia, I do believe that a lot of them will answer, of course, we would like to be Europeans. The common history with Russian Federation, of course we have a common history. We lived together since annexation of Bessarabia from Romania to at that time Russian Empire 1812. Then for a short time we had decided ourselves to join Romania after the Bolshevik revolution in Russia 1917, and since 1918 till 1940 we were also at that period part of Romania. And after Hitler-Stalin Pact 1939, Moldova comes further was annexed once more at that time to Soviet Union. Quite clear we have a common history with Russian Federation. Quite clear I have to recognize that Soviet Union was not only worthy things. I myself used the Soviet Union educational system. I have to recognize that in former Soviet Union was I'm going to finish. In Soviet Union was a very good, very brilliant medical assistance system, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, a lot of worse things was. That's why we have to deal with our common history. That's why we have to preserve our partnership. That's why I'm permanent talking that we have to recognize Russian Federation, one of the strategic partners, in my case of my own country, Republic of Moldova. Why European Eastern Partnership is unsuccessful? Just look on Belarus, Armenia, nowadays Ukraine under Yanukovych. Well, as whole this arrangement is unfortunately unsuccessful. In all this unsuccessful picture, only Republic of Moldova pretend to be a success story, and fortunately for us, is also recognized as success story in this arrangement. perhaps our colleagues in Brussels, they should rethink the goals of Eastern Partnership arrangement at all. And it should be a topic of discussion for the next year's Eastern Partnership Summit in Vilna at the end of next year. Which are the reasons for Republic of Moldova to join the European Union? Well, we have to be a part of the family. We want to be a free democracy. We want to be a free market, and we want to be equal treated from European, as they being treated the European partners now. Thank you very much.
Please join me in expressing our gratitude to the ambassador. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.